Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm back with some interesting Salesforce scenario based questions and I'm going to explain their answers too. So let's jump into it. So these questions are always complex, so I always curate the complex and thoughtful questions. My questions are never theoretical and typical. So you can take the concept and apply to similar questions. So it's all about the concept. The question might not repeat exactly the same way, the wordings might not be the exact, but interviewer may ask something similar that is using the same concept. So I request you all to focus on concept. The exact question might not repeat in your interviews, but the concept will be, and I cover all the important concepts. So stick with me. So let's start with the first question. You perform a bulk update on 200 records. Inside a before update trigger, a single record hits add error. But inside the same transaction, your code also enqueues a queuable job. What will happen to the queuable job? So let me simplify the question first. Let's think you are using a data loader and bulk updating 200 records. Now there is a single record that's problematic, that's not correct, so it hits add error. Okay. Now add error means your process is failed, your process is going to roll back. But inside the same transaction, you also have some logic to enqueue queuable job. Now the question is about what will happen to the queuable job. Options are, will it run normally after the transaction, or it is cancelled because DML is failed, or it is committed even if DML partially fails. And the last option is it depends on governor limits. Now many people think C is the correct answer. They think that queuable job is asynchronous, so once it is committed, even if DML partially fails, it is going to execute no matter what happens to your parent process. For example, here the trigger and your bulk update is your parent process, right? So if even if that is failing, even if that is rolling back, but your queuable is already committed to the system, right? So it will execute. People think like that, but this is completely wrong. This is not right. The correct answer is B, it is cancelled because DML is failed. So when any record in bulk operation hits add error, so add error is just an example of parent process failing, but there might be any reason your parent process is failed. So inside before trigger, if something fails, Salesforce is going to roll back your entire transaction, and it will include all DML operations, any future queuable scheduled jobs enqueued in the same transaction, and any platform events. And a queuable job is only enqueued if the transaction commits successfully. Okay, so your enqueue job will also be rolled back, so your queuable job will not run. Okay, it is cancelled. So the concept here is, if your parent process fails, your asynchronous operations get rolled back as well. Okay, I have one resource to explain this scenario. I'll provide you the link. So this is a Salesforce article talking about the same thing. So this document confirms our theory. Let's start with the second question. The scenario is, you use a static boolean in a helper class to prevent recursion. Inside the same trigger, you call a @future method. The question is, what is the value of static variable inside the future method? Now those who don't know, we use static boolean to prevent recursion in triggers. So basically, if a trigger is on account object, for example, and if your account is updating contact, and there is a trigger on contact as well, and again contact trigger logic is updating account, so this is a loop, right? So this is a recursion. So to avoid this, we use static booleans in our code. Okay, so we just execute some code if it is the first run, and then we skip if it is again coming back to it again and again, like in a loop. So we don't want recursion, so that's why we use static boolean. Now in the same trigger, you have @future method. Now the question is about, what is the value of this static variable inside future method? The options are same as in the trigger, reset to default, null, or it retains the value only once per transaction. Okay, so it might confuse you. So many people may say same as in the trigger because the future is being called in the trigger. So they may think trigger and future method is in the same transaction. So the static boolean should have the same value as in the trigger, right? But this is wrong. The correct answer is reset to default. The static variables do not persist into future queuable contexts. So static variables are not going to persist into future or queueable contexts because these are asynchronous operations. So they run into separate transaction. Okay. Then the next question is, field history tracking is enabled on account. A before update trigger modifies a tracked field. Okay. And a flow also modifies the same field. Which value is actually written to field history? So you have field history tracking turned on, and you have a trigger before update trigger that is modifying that field, and then there is a flow which is also modifying the same field. So what will be your field history? Will it be a trigger value or the value which is being modified in the flow, or both values, trigger and flow, both values in the history entries, or random, depends on the timing which is firing first. So what is the correct answer? The correct answer is flow value. Always remember, last write wins. Okay, the last update will always win. And the field history tracking captures the final committed value, not intermediate changes. Okay, so even if there are 10 triggers, 10 flows in between changing the value from one value to another, it doesn't matter. Field history tracking will always capture the last value, the last committed value, not intermediate changes. Okay, so in this scenario, even if the trigger is updating field value first, but that's not going to be registered in the field history tracking because that's not the final value. The flow is updating its final value, so that value is going to be registered in the field history tracking table. Okay. Then the next question is, you run SOSL inside a trigger that fires due to a record update. SOSL returns stale data, means old values, even though the record was just updated. Why does SOSL see stale data? So basically SOSL is very similar to SOQL, but it is used to search the data. Okay. Now the question is, why SOSL is returning the stale data? The options are, SOSL uses a search index that lags behind commit, then trigger hasn't committed yet, or SOSL is strongly consistent for indexed fields only, or API limitation. Okay, now this sounds very complex, I know, but the answer is very simple. SOSL is not as fast as SOQL. Just remember that it uses a stale index. It's not real time. Okay, don't try to complicate. Just remember that it's not real time. Now, why it's not real time? Salesforce Object Search Language, that is nothing but SOSL. It uses an asynchronous index. Okay. And what is asynchronous indexing? Basically, so when your record is created or updated, it is added to the search index asynchronously. Means there is going to be some delay, like 1 to 2 seconds of delay before it is searchable via SOSL. Okay. So it is going to use a stale index. So there might be some minute delay. Okay. That's what indexing lag is. So depending on your system, if your system is very heavy and you are processing lots of load, then that lag will be more. Okay. And it will be often, few seconds. It won't be more. But the concept here is SOSL uses a stale index. That's why even if your field is updated, it might not come into SOSL result. It might not pop up there. Okay. So remember this concept. Then the next question is, your code uses a large map which is having string as key and values as list of S object with 500k keys. Now CPU time spikes even when there is no DML or no SOQL. Means your code has no single DML, no SOQL, but still your CPU time is spiking. Why? Why? And you have this large map of string and list as object, and you have 500,000 keys in your map. Now what is the reason your CPU time is spiking without doing any DML, any SOQL? The options are, first, map is too large, then second, internal hashing CPU cost, third is Apex GC overhead, or fourth is nested list. The correct answer is internal hashing CPU cost. Now let's understand this concept. So when you work with extremely large maps, okay, Salesforce does hashing. Okay, so those who don't know what is hashing in the map, basically when a key is added to a map, Apex calculates a hash code for that key. So this calculation and then resolving collisions and everything, that is costing CPU timeout. So these are CPU heavy operations. Okay, so even if you are not doing any socket DML, but the more keys you store, more hashing will happen, rehashing will happen, and that is going to cause significant CPU time consumption. Okay, and if you want to understand other options, why they are incorrect, but as a developer you should be comfortable with all these terminologies, and they are not that complex. Let's have a look at it. The first is map is too large. Now this option might sound correct, but technically this is not the exact reason, right? The exact reason is hashing operation. Then the second incorrect option was Apex GC overhead. Now this is about garbage collection, and in Apex the garbage collection is very minimal and it doesn't contribute to dominant CPU cost. So this will not be the correct answer. Then the last option was, which was incorrect, nested list. So it was not about list of S objects, unless you heavily iterate them, means you heavily use them inside for loop, etc. CPU cost occurs before that, when you have initiated your map, when you have declared your map, and then the CPU starts hashing it. The problem lies there. Okay, so the correct answer was internal hashing CPU cost. Remember that. So that's all for today. If you want more such questions and more in-depth interview preparation, you can get in touch with me. All the details are in the description. So let me know in the comments if this video was helpful for you, and do subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. Thank you.